Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. Okay, we talked quite a bit about Brazil. We talked some about domestic production, but Glyn, I want to start with you because as we look at this impressive price run that we've seen with cattle, do you think we continue to shrink this cattle herd into 2024? And how long do you think these higher cattle prices will last?
So the first question, yes, we likely will shrink it further because that will happen when we pull the trigger on herd expansion. We will take heifers out of the system to keep them back on the ranch to rebuild the breeding herd. And a lot of folks think that process will start in 2024 and maybe be going stronger into 2025. That's the supply answer. This is an important segue to remind the students that are with us, thanks for coming out, is supply and demand both matter on the cattle prices we see. So if beef demand holds up and we have the supply situation play out, we'll sustain higher cattle prices. Beef demand itself is really important. We've talked about export, the international market. That's just one of three channels, domestic retail, domestic food service being the other two. Beef demand needs to sustain strength across those three, along with that supply story to sustain these elevated cattle prices. I think there's a decent chance that will occur. Maybe the macroeconomic situation will improve over the next 18, 24 months, but it's really important to monitor beef demand, not just the number of hooves that are in the cattle industry.
Well, real quick, you talked about demand and supply. So supply side in pork, how much contraction do we need to see in order to finally get these profit margins back in the green?
Yeah, and that's not a fun thing to talk about. It's important to remember the cost of production have elevated notably more in the hog production system than what we've seen an increase in market hog prices. So that's a simple profit squeeze that's occurred. A lot of estimates suggest maybe 10% of the sows need to exit our industry to sort of right size with the current economics. Now, exactly how fast it'll happen and if we'll have exactly 10% or not, there's a lot of moving parts to that. This ties into livestock disease issues we'll talk about in a moment as well. But the U.S. hog industry is in the process of shrinking.
So we talk about some of the headwinds for pork here in the U.S., but when you look for Brazil and you look at crop farmers right now, what are some headwinds that Brazil's facing? We've heard about drought, but what are some of the main headwinds that you think they're facing there?
So definitely, so one big issue is the price of fertilizer. They depend on imported fertilizer that comes from Russia and Belarus. So we have all that conflict in the region of the world. Prices have gone up dramatically and that's squeezing the profits. And the major drawback of Brazilian agriculture really are transportation costs. Their transportation costs are huge. It's a large country. It's not easy to come from where you produce the soybeans, the corn, etc., to the ports that are on the coast. So, and then you have the similar macroeconomic problems that we see here: high interest rates, trying to tame inflation, and high levels of debt at the farm level. So those are the issues that they are dealing with at this point.
Dustin, when you look at China, one of the headwinds that they've really dealt with, and we've heard it come back and then kind of tame down again, but ASF in China. How much devastation did that cause? And if ASF were to enter the U.S., what would that mean for U.S. producers?
That's a good question. So in China, it had pretty devastating impacts. Obviously, the hog industry here is a lot different than market structure in the U.S. But if ASF was to enter into the United States, which it is knocking on our back door down in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, if it was to enter into the United States, Iowa State did a study a couple years ago that said if we got it, what would happen? Well, we're probably going to lose export markets immediately. Well, how are we going to get rid of that excess surplus of pork? Prices, they found U.S. live hog prices are going to probably need to fall by 40 to 50%. So Glyn's already talked about the margins a minute ago. And so you're talking prices are going to fall by 40 to 50% of live hog prices just to get rid of that excess. And it's not just hogs, it's going to spill over into your other proteins, beef, chicken. Those producers are going to be impacted. There's going to be less of a demand for grain feedstuff, so grain prices will also have an impact as well. So it would be devastating.
Which is why the industry is working so hard to keep it out. Glyn, let's end on a positive note. Some economists are dubbing 2024 the year of protein. They think that protein demand is just going to be phenomenal from around the globe. Do you agree with that?
It certainly can be. It's important to note that there is strong evidence of meat protein demand. There's a lot of interest both domestically and abroad, but there's been macroeconomic challenges. So here at home, cost of living has exceeded earnings for some time. That's put downward pressure on buying power. The meat demand monitor that we've talked about in other segments, breaks it down for those who want more on it. I think there's reasons to be cautiously optimistic by the end of 2024. The macroeconomic situation is better, and that would facilitate that interest in buying more meat. So I tend to agree 24 will be better than 23, but it hinges on the macroeconomic improvement to occur.
Nelson, Glyn, Dustin, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We need to take a quick break, and then we'll have much more right here on U.S. Farm Report.
Yeah!